Hi everyone, this is an evergreen challenge, meaning you can do it at any time and you got points for it. There's no expiration to the challenge. And it has its roots in two things. One is the beginning of that video I had about procedures where I had a box that when you tilted it, it played some music. And then when you held it straight up, the music stopped. And when you tilted it again, it resumed right where it left off in the song. The other thing is it has its roots in people were seeming to enjoy that music experiment. So I thought, why not combine them and make a challenge? Can you duplicate that box? And that box used what's called a tilt sensor. And this tilt sensor really is just another version of a button. So you can treat it just like a button. It's wired the same way. And the pen mode is input pull up. It has a little bead of mercury in there. I think it's mercury. It's some conductive material. And when it's held straight up, it's like the button's pressed. So that mercury makes contact with both little legs. And when you tilt it, it's like the button is not pressed. So that's kind of this function of the tilt sensor. So the circuitry is really easy. It's just sort of like substituting this tilt sensor for the button in your button circuit, and you're all set to go. What's more tricky is writing the code for this tilt sensor. And what we're going to do is just alter the code a bit. I'm going to show you how to do that. That just makes it a lot easier to do that. Hey, when I tilt the box, play the music, and when it's not tilted, just stop right where and resume right where we left off when I tilt it again. So I'm going to change this code to work the same way, but it'll just enable us to do that extra little bit of incorporating the tilt sensor. And as you can see, this is a pretty rudimentary compared to the real code we had, but the main structure is sort of the same. So I'm hoping you can imagine that this is similar to what we've been doing with the music code. And here's where the similarity is. So we have this song length, which is 5 in my case. It's a pretty short song. And then the notes are an array. So it's D4, two D4s, an E4, and another E4, and then this F sharp 4. So that's the notes I have and how many there are, 5 of them. And then we did a for loop. So we start off at I is 0. And remember, when we're trying to get elements out of the array, we start counting at 0. Right? So this D4 is represented by notes 0. So we start at 0, go all the way, but not including all the way up to 5 here. And then we increment I. And instead of doing all that fancy stuff that's in the code that you'll need to do, I'm just printing the number, so it'll start at 0, and then it'll print what notes at that number. So the first thing it'll print will be 0, and then D4. Then it'll print 1, so we've incremented I here, and then it will go to this D4, and so on. So that's what this code does. Let me run it. And let's look at the serial monitor here. And I've been running this all along, so there's a lot of stuff here. But you can see that at 0, it's D4, 1 D4, 2 E4, 3 E4, and then F sharp. Then it starts right back at 0 because that for loop is in a loop, so it keeps repeating. So that's the old method. Let's see if we can change it so that it'll work better with that tilt sensor. And remember, the behavior is going to be exactly the same. So when I do this serial print, it's going to look identical, but the structure will just help us. And let me just save it as something else. I'll call it the new song plan. How's that? All right, so here's the new song plan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this int up to the top. So it's going to be a global variable, meaning we can access it anywhere. And sure, let's do the same thing with song length. I can get rid of song length here. That looks good. And actually, let me initialize I to be 0 because we want to start at note 0. Right? We want to go note 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then start again at 0. The song is going to keep repeating. So that looks good. I could move this string notes all the way up to the top, but I'll leave it where it is. No problem with that. So I'm going to get rid of this for loop because we don't need it in this method. All right. So let's take a look what we have here. So in the loop, I'm going to print I. I is initially 0, so it'll print 0, and then it'll print notes 0, and note 0 is D4. then again, just to simplify matters, I just delay it for a second instead of the code in the original music example. And then we're going to need to do something because we want to move on to the next note. So in order to do that, I'm going to go I equals I plus 1. So now I was 0, but now at the end here, I is 1. So we loop again, and we get serial print I. I is now 1, so it'll print 1. And then it'll print notes 1, and notes 1 is D4. And then we'll increment I again. Now I is 2. We do the loop. It'll print 2. And then it'll print notes 2, which will be E4. So we're progressing through the song with this. Now the problem will come is that we'll keep increasing this. It'll go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, when we want to just stop at 4 and start over again at 0. So I'm going to use one of my favorite things, which is a modulo operator. Well, this will be actually song length, so let me put that in. And what this does is it's asking the question, how much is left over when we divide by song length, right? So if I is 0 and we divide by kind of grade school math, we divide by 5, what's left over is 0. There's nothing left over. If I is 1 and we divide by 5, the answer is, there's no 5s in 1, but we have one remainder, a remainder of 1. So once we get to 5 here, so let's say I is 4, we add 1 to it. So now this I plus 1 is 5, and we divide by song length, which is 5. Then what's the remainder? The remainder is 0. So this has the effect of keep resetting the counter 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And let me try that code. And as you can see, the behavior didn't change, right? It still goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And so the behavior is exactly the same. It's just another way of doing our code. But the difference here is we can easily stop and start it, right? So we only want this part, or in my little example, or that entire play the music part, to be executed only when we've tilted the tilt sensor, only when we've tilted the box. So that only happens when we tilt the box. And you can probably hopefully figure out what you need to do there. So that was my little clue and helping you getting started with this tilt sensor. So good luck with this remix challenge. It's going to be fun. I just find tilt sensors kind of interesting and music pretty fun too. So I hope you'll enjoy the challenge. Take care. Bye.